Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to continue now, as I say, with March 1st on Saturday. I wake to a new day, listen, observe. In the absence of thought, I dress and crawl out of the tent with Susan right behind me. There is a calmness in the wind, and the sky is blue and full of sun. Susan prepares breakfast, then we go for a walk, though farther than yesterday. We walk out about 3 miles on the road that leads to a highway, then we turn around and walk back. It is so quiet here, so peaceful, and that beauty is present again, a beauty that seems present when thought is not, when the mind is vacant, clear, silent. We arrive at the campsite, take the recorder, and I begin to talk on the psychological thought processes we all use to sustain ourselves with. A short period later, I observed 2 couples in a pickup pull a trailer with Texas license plates into a campsite next to Susan and me. An ATC, all-train cycle, sits in the back part of the pickup. Susan and I conclude working with thought, and I help wash her hair. When I began to heat the water using the water heater, I discover the propane bottle is near empty. We become aware that it is an expensive way to heat water. The proper way is to use a 5-gallon propane tank, which is less expensive. However, I would need the tank plus the necessary equipment to connect it to the heater. We think we'll settle for heating the water on the camp stove. Later, I begin to pull some preventive maintenance on Howard. The door lock needs repair on the passenger side, and the valves need to be checked, along with the head bolts. Howard seems okay, except one valve is too tight. As I look at Howard, he seems small. However, I think he is rapidly becoming a giant and serving our needs adequately. He carries much weight, climbs a few mountains, and he never fails us except the one occasion when I drained the battery. And even then, it did not take much time or trouble to remedy the problem. Susan and I observed more people come to camp, and some people are driving their toys around the hillside. Susan prepares vegetable soup and us and Sammy for dinner. After dinner and a short walk, she cleans the dishes and I build a fire. We sit by the fire and enjoy popcorn and a quiet evening. Later I play the guitar, making up lyrics as I go along. We observe 3 or 4 Japanese go-karts go past us at what seems a good clip. They are making a racetrack out of the road that goes around the campsites. Each vehicle has at least 1 light, and some have 2. I begin to create a song about people that work all week to pay for their toys so they can go to the area away from the cities and become even more animal, and how they pack up Friday, then leave for a recreational area that is sometimes 4 to 7 hours away. I will admit, I have done that often myself, and it did not take too long to get tired. When Sunday comes, it is pack up time again, and that long drive back home to unpack, then work another week so they can do the same thing again. The evening is late. Many people here are in bed, and those same 3 or 4 Japanese go-karts are still racing around the campsites. I hear someone yell, "Why don't you boys go home?" Suddenly all noise stops. The race is over. Susan and I conclude the day with the boys. I would die to the day, the yesterdays, and awake to a new day with a fresh, attentively aware brain. March 2nd, Sunday. I wake later than usual with the usual rays of the sun and the unusual sounds of human voices. Susan and I dress, crawl out of the tent, and greet ourselves to the new day. We enjoy a breakfast, clean the dishes, then go for a walk. It seems quiet this morning, and I observe that a few people have already left. Back at the campsite and experiencing a cold picnic table, I staple some cardboard sheets together for 2 placemats. Later, we take a walk up a hill that we have not taken before, and I find where someone left some wood that we take back to the camp. I observe the people next to us in the trailer have packed up and left. They had left some considerable chunks of wood that we also take over to the campsite. We walk over to a toilet, and as we are nearly there, I observe a man walk out carrying a roll of toilet tissue in one hand. Hastily I say, "Thank you." He pretends not to hear, though it is obvious that he attempts to conceal the tissue. I check the toilet, and sure enough, there is no tissue. So Susan and I walk to another toilet. It has a couple of rolls of tissue paper. The guy that took the tissue drives a new foreign car, has a wife, 2 kids, and certainly does not seem to be lacking in the money department. We walk back to the campsite and wash. Then Susan begins to prepare dinner. After dinner, we clean the dishes and go for another walk, where we observe that, again, we are the only human animals here. Susan and I come back. I build a fire. There we sit and enjoy ourselves. Suddenly, I feel raindrops. We make sure everything is covered. Then we move to the tent where we conclude the day. I would die to the thoughts of the day, the yesterdays, and awake to a new day, a free man. March 3rd, Monday. Awake and observe there is no rain. I dress, crawl out of the tent, and observe clouds in the sky block the rays of the sun. The wind seems to give indications that it will increase today. Susan comes out of the tent, washes, and she prepares breakfast. After dishes, we go for a walk. Once back at the campsite, I observe the wind becomes stronger, having havoc with the tent, so I break down the tent and tie it to the ground. I build a fire. Susan and I stand by it to keep warm as we talk about the directions we will be heading. We will attempt to arrive in the state of Iowa by the 1st of May this year. Later, Susan and I remove ourselves to Howard, writing, discuss the volumes, then Susan prepares dinner. I fetch more water from the stream and we go for another walk. Being able to move outside the self, I can easily see how much walking is becoming a part of these lives. We return to the campsite and I prepare some popcorn which we enjoy as we stand by a fire and I keep warm. Soon we conclude the day and I would die to the day, as always, to the yesterdays, and I wake up to a new day with a clear, silent mind, a fresh brain. March 4th, Tuesday. Awake early to a new day. Susan and I stand outside the tent and observe a clear sky, though the sun has yet to make its debut. The wind is present and the air is cold. We enjoy a breakfast, wash the dishes, and go for a fast walk to warm ourselves. Back at the campsite, we prepare to leave for Tularosa to pick up some goods plus mail a few letters. I take a few items off the roof of Howard and place them inside the tent. I also turn a radio on and place it inside. In the event someone comes by, they shall think someone is here. After I place the gas can in Howard, I go for a walk as Susan writes some letters. I observe a vehicle that seems to have been sitting for some time. As I walk further, I observe another vehicle with a tent sitting next to it, though I see no one. These 2 vehicles are the only vehicles here other than Howard. When I get back to the campsite, Susan has finished writing and she is ready to leave. We get in Howard and I drive us out of the area and toward the highway where the pavement begins. I stop, ask Susan should she wish to drive to the highway, which is approximately 6 miles away. She says yes, so I get out and walk around to the other side as she climbs over to the driver's seat. I make a mental note of it, though I make no reaction whatsoever to what I observe. Susan has not driven a standard transmission, so when the opportunity to learn arrives, she gladly accepts. I think she does a good job. However, I'm relieved when we get to the highway. Poor Howard. Though he seems to know and looks as though he says, "No problem, I can handle it." After Susan stops, I get out, walk around, and sit in the driver's seat. Susan simultaneously climbs over to the passenger seat. I drive us on to Tucson, where we purchase food, lots of bread. Fill Howard with regular at 93 cents a gallon. Fill the gas can with unleaded and buy some tortilla chips. I drive to the post office, purchase some stamps, and mail some letters. Again, as I drive from place to place, I catch myself searching for the places Billy the Kid may have stayed. Some buildings seem old enough to have been here when he was passing through. I drive into a vacant lot, park, and Susan prepares a couple of Sammys. We sit in Howard and enjoy the Sammys with a cold glass of milk before we head home. Susan and I begin to experience the reality that wherever we are home. We arrive at the corner. I turn, drive over to the side of the road, and stop. Again, I ask Susan should she wish to drive, and again she says yes. I get out and walk around as she again climbs over to the driver's seat. How come one does not walk around? I don't know. Yes, one does. Because I'm lazy? Susan commences to drive onward as I sit. observe everything from outside the cell. Susan arrives when the pavement ends and comes to a stop. She moves the shifter into neutral, then applies the handbrake before she lets off the foot brake. I get out of Howard and proceed around as she simultaneously climbs over to the passenger seat. I drive 7 miles on the dirt road toward home. There is a creek that we have to go through, and I stop Howard in the middle so he may cool. We arrive at the campsite and find everything as we have left it. We organize ourselves, put things away, and Susan begins to prepare dinner as I dig a hole to place food. I cover the top with wood to block the sun and keep animals away. After dinner, we go for a walk. We talk about getting a trailer when we arrive in Iowa, or perhaps sooner. Of course, that shall mean a larger engine for Howard, as the engine he has now is not powerful enough to pull a trailer. It seems to me that a 1600cc or an 1800cc shall fit in Howard without much difficulty. The trailer is essential for the summer to provide a more suitable place to ride. No offense to Howard. In any event, we will send out much concentrated energy and see what comes back. Walking on, Susan and I observe a couple of men drive in with a pickup and fifth wheel trailer, and another pickup that pulls a trailer with horses inside follows. They have a black poodle that begins to bark as we walk by. A man looks over at us and says, "Watch out, he is fierce." "That is why I'm on the other side of her," I say. The men laugh as we walk on back to the campsite. We sit in Howard, light a candle, and listen to a radio talk show I had served as guest. Afterwards, Susan and I begin a conversation where she speaks and I listen without any reaction of any kind. When she is through speaking, I begin to speak as she attempts to listen without any reaction. When first learning, like most other things, it is difficult and requires a great degree of discipline. Though hard to do at first, Susan can see the significance and becomes excited. She observes, experiences a conversation without arguing or having some silly debate. After exhausting the brains, we retire to the tent and conclude the day. Wednesday, awake observing a timepiece. The rays of the sun penetrate the tent. Susan is awake. We greet each other, dress, and crawl out of the tent. After we wash, Susan prepares breakfast. We enjoy eggs, Sammy's with hot tea, and some fried rice that is left over from yesterday. We become aware that the people who have the horses also have 2 hounds that seem to enjoy baying much of the time. After dishes, we walk for about 4 miles and observe a man-made pond that looks as though it has lost nearly all its water. What water remains is thick with algae, and I observe cow manure spread along the edges. The weather has warmed somewhat, though it is still cold, and it keeps us at a good pace as we walk back to the campsite. I observe that beauty again that knows no thought of any kind. I observe the self, attempt to describe it, and observe that beauty leave at that instant. We take cold water, writing material over to a picnic table on the other side of the road where the sun shines, and we write. Later, Susan prepares Sammy's. We continue to write for an hour or so, then return to the campsite. Susan prepares dinner, and afterwards she washes the dishes as I build a fire. The night comes to greet us. The sky is clear of clouds and full of bright stars. Soon the fire burns out, and we retire to the tent. I will awake to a new day, a free man. That's it for this video, folks. Next we will start March 6th on a Thursday. Stay tuned. Keep going.